Just a quick note to let you know that today's conversation with Stephen J. Golds ran into some technical difficulties. So the first 25 minutes, there's a little bit of lag. There are times where the audio and video are out of sync, but after 25 minutes, everything runs perfectly. This also explains why mid interview we both change outfits because, in fact, we had to record these on two separate days. So we didn't have a costume change. We didn't think this was some bizarre rock show where we can just change outfits. Recorded over two separate days. So, with that said, let's get on with the show. Steve, welcome to This Is Horror Podcast.
Thank you, Michael. Cheers. Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's a little early for both of us here in Japan, but we are doing it as the schedule permits before 7 a.m. in fact. And so you've got you've either got a Merry Christmas sign in the background or you're
Yeah.
just celebrating someone called Chris because all I can see in the camera is Merry Chris.
Yep. Merry Chris.
I want to know what early life lessons you learned growing up, and they don't necessarily have to pertain to writing, just anything that you learned during those formative years.
Wow. I've never been asked that before. I think the most important one that's led me through my kind of my personal life, my working life, and also my writing life, Twitter life, is keep your nose clean. Um, keep your head down, keep your nose clean, and just don't be a shitty person. Is something that I try and live by. So I tend not to talk out of school too much. I just keep myself to myself and try not to involve myself in things that could be volatile. Or I try, but it never really works out. I always get involved somehow. But I think it's important to always just focus on yourself. And another life lesson that I've learned is don't compete with other people, but concentrate on yourself. The only person that you should be competing with is your past self. So um, rather than comparing myself to perhaps other writers, I compare my aims to what I achieved before, and then say, okay, how can I outdo that? How can I improve on that? Is something that I try.
Yeah, do you think there was a moment when that lesson became reality for you or when it was imparted? Perhaps a time where you didn't keep your nose clean and then you realized, okay, this is the way that it's got to be.
Um, I think there's been quite a few times that's happened to me, but I think within writing, I think within writing, for example, a good example of this is most of the novels that I've written have been about 60,000 words, but the novel that I'm writing now is actually at 65,000 words, and I'm about 50% of the way through. So this is going to be the longest thing I've written. Um, and also, I've tried to outdo myself by writing something a little bit lighter. A lot of my stuff has been very dark, very relentless, and I've tried to push myself to write something a little bit lighter and less disturbing for the novel that I'm writing now.
Yeah, is this the novel that is set in Japan?
It is, it is. It's actually set in Nagoya, where I am, and next to you. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's the first time I've actually even written properly about living in Japan, life in Japan. And this is something actually I want to talk to you about as well. Um, I kind of get sick and tired of, for example, I see a documentary on the BBC or I see something else on YouTube, and it's always kind of focused in on the quirky side of Japan, the kooky side of Japan, and then it kind of, with the novel that I'm writing now, I wanted to show the normal, everyday life side of Japan. There's no robots in this novel. There's no quirky um, animation style references too much. There's a few, but yeah, there's nothing like that. There's maybe a short reference to capsule hotels. I don't talk about using chopsticks at all. So I've tried to write a realistic portrayal of everyday life in Japan. How about you? What do you think about that? Like always, you see something that's about robots, or it's about something completely ridiculous, like for example, cat hotels, and not cat hotels, cat cafe, right? I've never been to a cat cafe, yet whenever I talk to friends in London, they always ask me, "Oh, have you been to a cat cafe?" It's like I've never even seen a cat cafe, let alone gone into one, and I've been here 17 years, right? So those kind of things, I've tried to avoid those kind of quirky little things.
Yeah.
There is cosplay though. I've got cosplay in the novel, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be obvious when somebody is writing a story about Japan, but they blatantly don't live in Japan. And it seems
Mm,
like you've just got all of this off documentaries, or maybe you had a trip once. And like, I
mm,
mean, it's I guess it's conceivable that there could be a cat cafe scene. I mean, I'm imagining maybe there's some sort of shootout and you run into the cat
mm.
cafe. That could be quite
I
funny
like
if
that.
it then
I do like
descended
that.
into it,
Mm,
but it's not going to be like a part of everyday life. And like I mean, the girl in the video is set in Japan, and some people really appreciated that. It was realistic, and it's like, well, yeah, I'm just writing about in kind of normal life. You're not gonna see like, oh, well, let's visit the robot restaurant. What? No, you're not gonna do that every day. And if you've seen
mm,
the prices of going there, you wouldn't be able to afford it anyway. And I think too there can be a misconception, even actually sometimes with people that I meet in Japan, that like, I must be into anime because I decided to visit
mm.
Japan. And I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
really care for anime at all. I mean, there's a few that I've watched, and in all honesty, the only reason that I've watched anime before is to try and learn some Japanese, but it is not an interest of mine. I
Mm,
don't have an extensive manga collection. So yeah, it's good to see that. And really, I mean, the realistic Japanese novels are written by Japanese people living in Japan, like Haruki Murakami and Ryu Murakami, and like Higashino Keigo, like, and
mm.
you just, it's a story and it's in Japan. You don't need to have this tick box of robots and anime,
Yeah, yeah.
as
That's
you say. So
partly what I'm
I'm
worried about.
I
Like
mean, I'm glad
publicists
you're
are expecting
going
that.
down that route. I'm also not surprised. I mean, having read your other fiction, it would be totally bizarre if you were like, I'm writing about Japan and now I'm doing the tourist tick box. It wouldn't fit with anything you've done before. But
Mm,
I mean, before, you've pretty much set your novels in the past. I mean, that the 40s to 80s seems to be the real sweet spot for you. But am I correct in thinking not only are you setting this in Nagoya, but is it in modern day Japan?
yes, yes. It's the first thing I've ever written that's actually set in now. So it's actually set in 2022, just as the COVID is easing down here in Japan. It's actually set in that time. It's the first thing I've written, I think, in this century. Um, I'm really in love with the past. I think there's something bittersweet about the past where I think most of what I've written has been set in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, which personally I'm interested in. I'm interested in everything really to do with those kind of eras. Music. I love the music of the 60s, the soul scene in the 60s, um, the fashions of the 1950s and 1960s. Yeah, it's just I think all of my work's really primarily focused towards that love of prior generations. But with the new novel, I just wanted to make it as much about life right now as I could. And it's been refreshing actually because I haven't had to do. So I started in September, mid-September, and I'm now about 65,000 words in. I've been a bit lazy recently. I haven't written as much as I wanted every day, about maybe 500 words a day or something. So it's gone down. But I haven't had to do really as much research as I previously had to before. Whereas when I wrote Always the Dead, which is in the 1940s in California, I actually researched quite heavily the weather and the atmosphere in weather records at that time. Uh, I spent a couple of months going through old photos of Palm Springs and whatnot. But with this, it's set in Nagoya, it's set now. So I can just write about what I'm seeing directly. Um, if I go to an udon an udon restaurant, I can just easily write about that. I don't have to research anything. So it's been really quite refreshing and easy going, I think.
Yeah, and I want to kind of go back to your early years because I want to get a sense as to kind of how you arrived here, both literally in Japan, but also as a writer. So, what were your first experiences with story? Have you always been interested in stories? Were you reading them from a young age?
No, no, I wasn't. I actually mentioned this on a previous podcast, but I don't tell a lot of people this. But in elementary school, I was in a special ed class. I didn't actually know my alphabet, until the age of about 11. Uh, so I had maybe a lot of learning. I wouldn't say learning difficulties, but I had learning problems. I was a kind of I wasn't a studious child. So I kind of fell in love with reading at the age of, I think, about 13. And I was really interested in the Alien movies. So I'd watch Aliens, and I wanted to know more about that kind of universe. So I went to the library and I asked the librarian, I want to read this Alien book. I think it was Alien 3, the novelization, the movie novelization. And so I got it out from the library and I just really focused on it and I read it. And it really, after that, I think I wrote at the age of 11 or 12, I wrote um, a short story in English class. And it was the best in the class, the teacher said. So it really catapulted my English learning. Alien Free, thank you very much. But yeah, after that, I didn't actually read very much until the age, I think about 18, and I was in a charity shop, a secondhand store, and there was a bookshelf. I checked it out, and I picked up a book. It was called Post Office by this guy called Charles Bukowski, and I turned it over. It was about a guy that drank too much and delivered mail. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. I bought it. I think it was about a quid, pound or something. And I took it home and I just blew through it in a couple of hours. I was like, shit, this guy is amazing, because it was the first time I'd read something that kind of spoke to my existence at the age of 18, where it was kind of a working class guy from a working class background who, hated his job. And at the time I was, of course, going to university. I was going to start university, but I was working construction. Um, my dad's a foreman on a construction site, so he got me every summer. He would get me a job working construction, and I kind of, oh shit, sorry, I worked it, and my alarm going off. Um, so I worked the job, but I didn't really like it all that much. It was kind of dull and boring, manual labor, and yeah. So Charles Bukowski really spoke to me, and then that lit the fuse. I read the rest of his novels, blew through those, and I thought, wow, this guy can really, really tell a story. So I started writing a little bit. I wrote a couple of short stories. I sent them off to this writer, a Scottish writer called Laura Hurd. She's a writer based in Scotland, Edinburgh, and she was originally published by started reading Rebel Inc.'s novels. That introduced me to like Knut Hampson and a lot of great authors that they had there. John Fante as well. I found through Rebel Inc., the publisher, and then from there, that was the start. And then after that, from the age of like after I finished university, um, during university actually, I took a creative writing course. My professor was called Moy McCrory. She's another writer, and she pulled me aside and she said, "Wow, you've got so much talent." She was the first person in my whole life that I've actually said, you know, you and talent together about me. So, wow, that really inspired me. And then I just, worked a lot of crappy jobs. I worked as somewhere in a cardboard box factory, which doesn't even sound real, does it? A cardboard box factory. Um, I worked construction again, worked some other crappy jobs. I went back to university to do my PGCE to become a high school teacher. Um, I dropped out of that. I moved to Hong Kong. Things went bad in Hong Kong. Came back to London. I applied to many jobs in South America. I also tried Japan. But the dream was to live in South America. And then I got offered a job teaching business English out here in Japan. I took it. I only expected to be here a year. That was the plan, 1 year or 2 years. And then I met my ex-wife, had children. Of course, I wasn't writing at this time because I was trying to learn Japanese, learning the alphabets, hiragana, katakana, trying to learn the kanji. So that took all of my time. And then I think about nearly 4 years ago, I was going through a lot of problems mentally. And I thought, well, I'll start writing again as a way of therapy. I started writing poetry, started writing short stories again, and then boom, I got onto the novels. I wrote 3 novels in the space of, I think, a year, something like 100 short stories, hundreds of poems, and then, here I am years later, still in Japan, still writing. So yeah, that's my story, the brief summary.
Yeah, it's a remarkable one, really. I mean, for you to have gone from not being able to read the alphabet to then kind of reading the novelization of Alien Free, that is not a typical book that people start with. But I think it also highlights the importance, like with teaching and with reading, like finding what is it that the person actually engages with. And in a way, it's the same with Japanese learning, because you need a motivation, you need a reason. if you're just given some basic kind of Genki 1 and Genki 2 text, and it's like, well, read that, then that's not really going to light you up. But if there's like a certain book, if there's a certain manga, or there's a purpose, then you're kind of away. So, I mean, it must have been remarkable and so liberating when you unlock this and you realize actually this is something that I enjoy. And then, the other moment at 18, discovering Bukowski, because I feel like not many teachers say, "I'll pick up some Charles Bukowski," but then when you find him, it's kind of liberating. It's this bizarre moment where you're like, "What? You can write like this? You can write about stuff like this?" I mean, I kind of had a similar moment with
Mm-hmm.
the beat poets as well. People like Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, William Burroughs, and finding this as a mode in which we can write.
With learning, there's the introvert learner and there's the extrovert learner. And I think it's about, I found that I'm an introvert learner. So actually, my Japanese reading is better than my actual speaking. Um, so I think I'm just kind of made that way where I tend to focus more on words or reading. Even in English, I think that my reading and writing is much better than my actual speaking. Um, I think that's just how my brain works. But yeah, so when I'm teaching English, I you know try to figure out which of my students are introvert learners, which of my students are extrovert learners, and try to cater their learning towards what's best suited for them. Um, yeah, but it's not a great origin story, is it? The Alien free novelization. It's not even the best Alien movie, but yeah, it helped. It definitely helped. And then Stephen King. I discovered Stephen King as well. When I was working construction, I wore this massive fluorescent jacket, and in the pocket of the fluorescent jacket, I always had a Stephen King novel. So what I'd do is when no one was around, I'd sneak around, hide behind some boxes or something, and start reading, and I'd just be completely engrossed. And then it kind of introduced this idea of, which I try and tell my daughters all the time: if you have a book, you can time travel. If you have a book, you can travel to anywhere in the world. And I think that's the best thing about reading, really, is the idea of traveling or mentally exploring.
Yeah, yeah. And I think if you have a book, then, I mean, in many ways, you're never truly alone, which kind of ties into, I mean, it can be quite isolating being in, a country where you don't speak the main language, or you at least don't natively speak it. It isn't your native tongue. And I mean, I think with Japan as well, it's not just about the language being different, but the culture at times, the mentality. So, I mean, we can seek comfort and familiarity and adventure in books in so
Yeah,
many
definitely. I think
situations.
the whole thing with Japan is, I think that when you come here, if you come here to live, I think you have to completely cut away, uh, cut away somewhat the idea that you're an Englishman or you're Canadian or you're American. I think you got to somewhat cut it off and try to adapt 100% towards, Japanese culture and Japanese life. So actually, my tattooist, he always says to me, Steve, you're more Japanese than I am," and which I've heard quite a few times actually, from coworkers, or, "Steve, you're really quite Japanese." So hopefully, after 17 years of living in Japan, I kind of feel I kind of feel like this is my home 100%, and I kind of feel that I'm part of Japanese society. Again, my Japanese is very good. I can talk fluently daily life, but for example, I had some medical problems with I had pins and needles in my hands. I had muscle damage for a while, or nerve damage. I had nerve damage for a while. I've still got it quite a bit, but going to the doctors and trying to, I learned a whole bunch of new words about nerves and damage and whatnot. So you're always evolving, always developing, and picking things up as you go, culturally as well as linguistically. Um, so that's why I love living in Japan. Every day is you're learning something new. Even 17 years later, I love walking around Japan, especially at night, because even now, 17 years later, it still blows me away. Japan at night, all the neon lit up, all of the illuminations from the shops and stuff. It's got so much atmosphere here. I love it.
So before you were saying how your Japanese is actually better in terms of your reading level as opposed to your speaking, or it certainly was to begin with. So you also said, in fact, that you took a number of years out where you weren't really writing, where you were purely studying and focusing on Japanese. So I think it would be quite interesting to know a little bit about your language learning strategy, what you did to get so good at Japanese, and what that looks like in terms of the time frame and in terms of how long you were spending on Japanese study each day. So let's really dig into the minutiae of that.
Okay, so when I first arrived in Japan, I knew a handful of phrases like "gomen nasai," I'm sorry, sumimasen, excuse me, um, of course, konnichiwa, hello, that kind of stuff. So I knew some key phrases like a tourist, but I just started really heavily trying to learn the alphabets again. So there's three alphabets, as you know: hiragana, katakana, and then the more advanced kanji. So I just started learning hiragana, and it's basically like relearning the alphabet. I taught myself the alphabets again, and then from there, um, I began to be able to read, very similar to English language development. And then I also used to take classes. I used to go to a Japanese class maybe once or twice a week. There was an old lady that used to teach me. I actually had three teachers over the first, I think, 5 years, 1 hour a week. So it got my Japanese level up to conversation level, and then I studied for the JLPT, which is a Japanese language proficiency test, and there's five, four, three, two, one being the highest. And I didn't bother with five because I thought that was too easy, and then I passed four, and I studied really hard, and I passed the third. So my level is actually at the intermediate level at the moment. How about yourself?
How about myself? I just concentrating on the clock.
Yeah, yeah, my old mantle
That,
clock.
yeah, that's quite something. Well, I don't feel that we're quite done with learning about your Japanese language, Jenny. Because I mean, so you got yourself to N3, but clearly the journey didn't end
Yeah, yeah.
at that point.
It kind of did. It kind of did because so for all those years I studied Japanese, and then my first marriage and raising my children, I wanted my children to speak English, of course. They're
Mm.
mixed race, and so I started, instead of using Japanese at home to practice my Japanese, I strictly started using just English. And even until today, I just speak English with my daughters, and for that reason, my daughters are bilingual because the only way they hear English is, from me, only from me. So, and of course, they've got a couple of English classes a week. So, my English speaking time with my children is really important and has taken priority um, over perhaps speaking Japanese. And kind of it got to the point where my level is, I guess, an intermediate level. It's not advanced, so um, I can live extremely comfortably now um, using my Japanese. It can be difficult when, for example, I've got to go to the hospital, I've got a serious problem, or, you know, something to do with law or really high end vocabulary. But my Japanese is good enough. So my wife now, she can't speak English at all. So we communicate using Japanese or um, a mixture, a mixture of Japanese and English, which I sometimes use with my daughters as well, a mix of Japanese and English nowadays. So I don't know, like, of course, after that, I started reading. But what I wanted to do is I got Raymond Carver, for example, someone who uses very simple but very, how do I say, daily English,
Mm.
useful kind. And I bought the same edition in Japanese, and then I'd read the books together. So I'd read one page English and then one page in Japanese. So I got the understanding from it. And then I guess I also watch TV shows like The Sopranos or True Detective or something, but I watch them with Japanese subtitles. And then I'll be reading the subtitles and learning like that. A lot of the translation is way off, but it's a close equivalent. So I think it teaches me kind of um, useful Japanese, because for the first couple of years I learned with the old ladies, they would teach me really polite. So there's a Japanese
Yeah.
language is honorific, right? So there's, for example, taberu, eat, and then tabimasu.
Mm.
And then there's keigo, which is the extreme honorific, which is, what's that? I can't even remember now. Tabete golan or something like that. And taberu gozaimasu or something. But it's something very polite. And they taught me the honorifics, which I obviously didn't learn very well. And they taught me the very polite way, tabimasu. But no one talks like that when you're hanging out with Japanese people. And then my Japanese friends at the time were always like, "Why are you speaking so polite?" So I said to my Japanese teacher, I don't want to learn too polite. And then she was like, "Well, what do you mean? Why wouldn't you want to speak politely?" And I said, "Well, I want to just speak like everyone else is speaking." And so she taught me a little bit, but I could see it was really going against the grain. She just wanted to teach me, the really polite Japanese. So yeah, basically, my Japanese is for the last 2 years just self-taught and just immersion, I guess, immersion in, living in Japan for 17 years. I have picked up a lot of stuff daily, but I think if people were to see me speaking, like, for example, my family from back home or my friends from back home, when they come out to Japan, they're like, wow, you're fluent. You're really fluent in Japanese. And it's like, even though I'm at the level now where I am able to have conversation, I'm still quite insecure about it. 'Cause I think I sound a lot like Borat. Hello, I like this food. It's a nice, I think maybe I sound a little bit like that. So that can be worrying sometimes, and you got to have a lot of confidence. One of my friends, for the first 3 years that I lived in Japan, I thought he was amazingly fluent, but after actually becoming fluent myself or semi-fluent, I realized, wow, he's actually not talking about anything at all. You know, he was just falling with style, you know. So
Mm.
he would, ano sa, etone. So he would make these conjunction noises, which are, how do I say? You know what I'm saying? He would say those things a lot,
Yeah.
and he would use those so much. So, like, anyway, and so you know what I mean. And he would use these in the thing, but he wasn't actually talking about anything. He was, yeah. So you know what I mean? It's like, how do I say? It's really hot today, and then that it's hot today would be a small part, but the rest of it would just be kind of gibberish that sounded really
Yeah.
cool. So I guess
Yeah.
my Japanese is maybe quite similar to that now, but again, I teach at university, and I tend to teach. It's got to the point now where I can easily teach a whole class in Japanese. Um, but I try not to. Of course, I think it's important for my students to listen to English and interact in English. So I try not to use it, but there's been times where I have been able to teach whole classes in Japanese. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
fun. It's
It's
fun.
fun. And it's funny too how not knowing a lot, but like, if I go to a cafe and I order a coffee and I'm with people who don't speak Japanese, they're like, whoa, what a magic trick. And it's like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
literally just formed the most basic sentence possible. So yeah, you can kind of trick people into thinking, you're fluent or near fluent, but I guess it doesn't take too much to be able to function. I mean,
mm-hmm.
not to have any deep or meaningful conversations, but to just get by. So I
Yeah,
mean
yeah.
that is at least useful. But I mean I wonder, when you were learning and things, so you said about watching The Sopranos and having the subtitles. Were you watching the dub or were you watching it in English and then at the same time, like reading the Japanese and looking at in real time, okay, how have they translated that?
Yeah, I can't really be doing with dubs. I don't really watch
Mhm.
any dubs. So if I watch a foreign language film, I always watch it with the subtitles. And when hey, you, what are you doing? Like
Yeah.
the old Bruce Lee movies. But yeah, I read. I listen to the English, of course. James Gandolfini is talking, and then I'm listening or I'm reading the subtitles in Japanese. And like I said, a lot of the time it doesn't really quite match up because, for example, can we swear on your podcast?
You
Uh,
certainly can, yeah.
so, for example, there's in Japan, they don't really, as you know, they don't really have curse words the same way we do.
Yeah.
So there's the word kuso, which is like shit,
Mm.
but you could also use it for, fuck if you're in
Mm.
trouble. Or, for example, it's fucking cold would be kuso samui. So they add this word kuso, which means shit, to everything. It can be used as shit or as fuck, um, and it's added to everything. So, for example, uh, let's say, for example, I'm trying to think of some really bad words, but yeah, that's the difficult translation because you can have, for example, one word which isn't quite strong for English people, which is very strong for American people, the C word. In Japanese, that's really just translated as uh, shitty guy or shitty
Yeah.
girl or shitty person. There's there's not really a translation for curse words so much. Um, so that's always interesting when I'm watching something like The Sopranos. When I see Tony Soprano says the worst kind of stuff, and it's just translated as shitty. So even now, the book that I'm writing now is a Japanese thriller, and I'm trying to write the language as though it's in translation already. So in English, I'm trying to use, kuso, but in the Japanese sense of using it. Um, yeah, so I think the Japanese language is very innocent, I think, somewhat.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah. Well,
mm,
no, well, not just with swearing, but with any kind of word. I mean, if you had the word Subarashi, well, that can be brilliant, magnificent, excellent, wonderful. Like, there's just so many more words in English.
mm,
And I suppose, like, it, as a Japanese language learner, or as a Japanese speaker, it's good and it's bad. I mean, it's good in terms of learning because there's less words you technically have to learn. But then when you're trying to speak Japanese, it's like you can't quite get it as exact as you want. But I mean, I know quite early on when I started taking my Japanese studies seriously that, a classic beginner mistake, which I definitely did do to begin with, is you try and think what you want to say in English and then translate it into your mind into Japanese. But what you
mm,
have to do is, it's like, no, just say what you can with the language available, even if it is not exact at all, even if it is vaguely in the direction as to what you want to say. And maybe for people like us who are writers, that might be even harder because it's like, well, our words are our power. We don't want to say something vague. We want to say exactly what we want, but it's just not possible, and until you've got all of that vocabulary. And actually, even when you have, there just might be limits. That there's times where I'll ask my girlfriend, how do I say this really nuanced sentence? And it's like, you couldn't quite say it like that. You just have
mm,
to say this, which is a much simpler thing. And I
mm,
suppose that might kind of return to the idea that actually, yes, in Japan and communication, there is the language, but there's also what isn't said. There are
mm.
things that are implied. And
KY, right?
right,
Kyoyome.
so I wanted to ask, in fact, so you did say that when you were talking to your tattooist in
Mm,
Japan,
mm,
that he actually said that you are more Japanese than a lot of Japanese people that he knows. So I want to return to that.
mm.
What was meant by that? What are some of the things that you do or that other people have said that you do that are very Japanese in nature?
Wow, I think so. Shout out to Bacho-san. Bacho-san's been my tattooist since the day, or since the first week I arrived, until today. So I already had a few tattoos when I arrived, but really I went full out here in Japan, and it was Bacho-san. I've stayed loyal the whole time, just getting tattoos by the same person. And I remember when I got my first tattoo, I think I'd been in Japan for about 6 months. And after I bowed, I bowed deeply after he did the tattoo, and I said, like, thank you very much, master. Like that. And then he kind of cringed, like, what the hell are you doing, bowing? But he's really, it's weird because he's really old school Japanese, but at the same time, he considers himself outside of society, which is a whole other show that we could go into. This whole idea of the outsiders within Japan. Um, but I guess Japan is a country where you have to 100%, you have to engross and totally immerse yourself in the culture. Not so much that you're, how do I say, I've never worn a kimono, for example. That's something I want to save, for my official wedding ceremony. Is I hope to wear kimono at that time, but it's something that you have to give up the way things are done in your home country and just completely take on the Japanese way of doing things, I guess. So, for example, I haven't taken a day off work, for example, in I think about 15 years. A very, very, very long time. I haven't taken a day off. So if you're sick in England, I would call up, say, look, I've got a cold, I've got the flu, I'm going to take today off work. In Japan is you put a mask on and you go to work. It's and you try to avoid other people while you're at work. I guess that's one example of ways. I guess a few people, my wife now says that my body language has become quite Japanese, or I don't even know what that means. I can't really define it, but maybe it's like an atmosphere. Like so much of, like you said, in Japan, a lot of it is atmosphere and reading the air. And I think we're English or we're British, so we kind of had that somewhat in England, reading the air. We don't like to say things too directly, so a lot of stuff is done through body language and through indirect language. Um, so that took me a long time to get used to, and the Japanese will say KY, karewa KY. So, for example, here's KY. It means kuki o yomenai. He can't read the air. So that was really important. But just I managed when my first job in Japan was extremely corporate and very business style. So it was a crash course really in Japanese business etiquette and stuff like that. So it really helped. That helped me a whole lot. And yeah, I've just tried to engross myself somewhat in the culture. Or daily life culture. So I never planned to come to Japan originally. It just kind of happened. So I didn't have any preconceived notions of Japan. I didn't have any preconceived ideas of what I liked about Japan. I'd never watched anime or read manga and stuff like that. I still haven't. I don't know anyone that does really watch anime or read manga. So I don't know. Everyone has a different experience. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it's an interesting rabbit hole, the idea of the tattooist being an outsider and tattoo culture and kind of conceptions and misconceptions within Japan, as you say.
Mm,
That is an entire podcast in and of itself. But I mean, it's interesting too that I mean, at the point where you have one tattoo, you might as well get many because at that point it's like you've already got some restrictions, so it can be difficult to go to some onsen, some public baths, for example, or there can be
yeah.
a kind of perception as to who you might be. But I mean, I would say on those 2 points, I mean, first of all, like that, I have definitely noticed within the last few years that there are more onsens that are accepting people with tattoos. So I
Mm,
think it is getting better in that respect. Another point, I find that this is totally unfair. It's totally hypocritical, but it is the way that it is. But if you are a foreigner in Japan and you have a tattoo, you do not get the pressure or the assumption that a Japanese person with a tattoo would have. So I do find sometimes that, like, even though you can try to conform, you can try to kind of, I guess, fit into Japanese culture, that there will be times where you're given a pass. Um,
yeah. I think
just
so.
just through the nature of being a gaijin in Japan.
Mm. But I think there's still there's two types of tattoo. There's what they consider Japanese gang tattoos, and then
Yeah,
foreign fashion tattoos. So a lot of them will say, "Oh, these are just fashion tattoos," but lots of Japanese people still do have a very strong stigma towards tattoo. They find tattoos quite repulsive, and they have the idea that only bad people get tattoos. You know, no matter what country or culture you're from. Yeah, so like you said, when I first came to Japan, I had a few dotted everywhere, and I always wanted to just go full out and get the whole lot done, all joined together, sleeves and whatnot. And in summertime, I was already having to cover up long sleeves all the time. So I thought, oh, to hell with it. I'm just going to go all out and get it all done because I'm already suffering in the summertime. So yeah, but it's slowly changing. And, you know, my tattooist told me the amount of salaryman or businessmen or businesswomen that he's tattooing has increased. You know, so a lot of people do have tattoos, they're just not showing. As for onsen bathhouses and stuff like that, it really depends on the area. I was surprised at my hotel in Okinawa. There were no tattoos allowed, which is annoying when you've paid extra to go to an onsen hotel and you can't actually use the onsen facilities. And the same, I just got back from Hokkaido. We stayed at an onsen hotel there and couldn't use the facilities either. Even when I go swimming at the local pool, I have to wear full length, you know, wetsuit top. Um, yeah, so they don't want to see tattoos because I think once they, if for example, if they opened up the onsen and they said tattoos are okay, then you know they're going to have gang members coming. But the thing is with the yakuza is most yakuza nowadays, serious or how do I say mobsters or gang affiliated people are eschewing tattoos. They don't want to get tattoos because they know why would I identify myself like that? So why do I want to draw attention to myself? So the younger generation are actually not getting tattoos done. It's the older generation or maybe people who kind of want to live up to that image. But very serious ones are not doing that. I've heard.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I mean it. I think that there is like slowly more acceptance anyway, and there are more like young Japanese people deciding, you know what, I want a fashion tattoo for want of better phrasing. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think particularly if we're seeing a trend in which a lot of like yakuza are then not having tattoos, that we may see like a further decline in those restrictions.
See, for the listeners, I think we have to explain as well. Um, Even today in Japanese society, for a woman to perhaps color her hair blonde is no way. So I talked about this before, but my wife put highlights in her hair and she got a disciplinary warning about that. And it's completely mind boggling, even for me after, 17 years, that there is still it's still really frowned upon. It's the same as earrings, right? You'll see the businessmen, they have an earring on the weekends, but when it's work time, that earring's packed away, it's gone. And then when it's a weekend again, the earring goes back in. So yeah, it's the corporate environment can be quite rigid, I guess. But there's positive points and negative points to everything.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I mean, and even though we perhaps don't like to admit it, but it is the same in the West. Not to that level, but that, I mean, as somebody who, like, I grew up listening to a lot of heavy metal and dressing in like a kind of goth way, for again, want of better phrasing, like, I had a lot of facial piercings and like
Oh
ear
wow.
piercings and stuff. And like that there would unfortunately be judgments in the workplace, and like I think anyone like that, you have to kind of make a decision. It's like, well, am I going to conform even though I don't want to, even though in a way it's not quite true to my identity, but am I going to do it to try and, climb that ladder, or am I going to not do it, but then the consequence could be that there are judgments, and that there's no easy answer to that.
Hmm.
Th- but it's something that I think is getting better, but there's a lot of room for improvement. But
Mm.
I want to jump back in to the writing, and one of the things that you said is, when you decided, okay, you're really going to concentrate on your writing. I believe you said there was one year where you wrote 100 short stories in that year.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of them were, um, how do I say, flash fiction. So
Mm.
you're looking at short stories or flash fiction of about 500 words. But yeah, I wrote a huge amount. So I've released one collection of short stories a couple of years ago, and then I've already got enough short stories for one more collection of short stories that I haven't put together yet. Yes, I wrote like a demon. Um, when I'm on, I'm really on. So I've written like 65,000 words of the newest novel, but I've been beating myself up this week because I've only written, you know, 3,000 words or something in the last 5 days. That bothers me. I've only written 5,000 words, but I've been doing redrafting as I've gone as well, which I don't really ever count redrafts, but just overall word count. So I try to do at least 1,000 words a day if I can. I haven't been writing poetry for a long time. I'm not concentrating on short stories anymore. Just focusing on the novel. And then as soon as I finish this one, I'm going to go back and finish another novel that I was halfway through, and then start working on the sequel to the novel that I'm working on now. So just always trying to stay busy. If you want to be a writer, I think it's important to actually do writing. A lot of people just talk about writing, but they're not actually doing it. And I think it's a good idea to stay away from Twitter, because Twitter can just be a rabbit hole. You can end up. It's the same as YouTube nowadays. You can end up watching like an hour's worth of those 10-second videos. So I'm trying to just not use social media or YouTube or anything like that, and just concentrate on the writing as much as possible.
Yeah, I used to be quite obsessed with metrics and looking at how many thousand words I'd done each day. And I think that was quite a useful tool for starting out. And when I was initially getting into things and taking the writing seriously. But these days, I don't really obsess over it. I mean, I'll have an idea as to how much I've written, but I write every day, or I do something with the writing every day. So that could include redrafting. But as long as I'm working on it every day, as long as I'm making progress, I don't obsess over the numbers, because I mean, I did find that if I obsess too much, actually, whilst the quantity was improving, the quality was diminishing. So I'd rather just take the
Mm-hmm.
time to get it right, and to look over it and not look at that word count. And the thing is, anyway, if you obsess over the word count, it's like a false victory, because the rougher those words, the more you're just gonna have to redraft and edit it anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I found if I can get it nearer to right the first time, then even better. But I mean, I think about, there's this idea that a lot of us, we overestimate what we can do in the short term, but we underestimate what it is we can do in the long term. And if you are just like doing a little bit every day, you're going to write at least a novel a year. You're probably going to write a lot more than that. And that is, with the right sales, that is a career.
Mm-hmm. That's a dream, right? One or two novels a year, being able to write full time. Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
for a long time I felt under pressure from myself. I always feel like a sense of impending doom. Like I have to hurry up and write as much as I can. I always feel like I don't have much time. Um, I don't know why I feel that way. Just I just feel like I want to write as much as possible, as soon as possible, and build up a library of work. But I honestly, I don't know why I feel that way. I think it's maybe a holdover from from my more depressive days, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
I mean, I get that as well. I think there have been times where my obsession over writing has been to the detriment of other aspects of my life. And
hmm
I think I've got a pretty good balance at the moment. And I mean, what one thing I kind of make sure as well is that like I've got time each day for my relationship, and I know that to some people it might sound odd to be like, what am I kind of scheduling it in? In a way, in my mind, yes, because that is kind of how I work. If I don't spend an hour or so where it's like, right, this is the time with my girlfriend, if I get to feel that, just do whatever, then that there have been times in my life, particularly if I look back at things like with my with my previous marriage, where it's like I was just obsessively working all the time.
hmm
And I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that is, fair to that relationship.
mm. I completely feel the same way. I'm extremely hungry. I feel like I'm hungry for the success, but again, like you said, there's other priorities in life. So what I try to do is, this is my advice for anyone that's looking for time to write, is try to write 5 o'clock until 6 o'clock, or 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock in the morning. Try to do an hour early in the morning, maybe after you've had breakfast, after you've had your coffee. There's nighttime as well. Late at night is a good time to write. Maybe 1 o'clock in the morning or something is sometimes a good time. But as well, I also have the Word app on my cell phone. So if I'm waiting for a train, this is my writing time, or if there's always times where people pick up, instead of picking up and using YouTube or Twitter for 20 minutes, log on to the Word app and write something. Is something that's the reason why I could write as much as I did, a couple of years ago, is because I was strictly writing on my phone. I didn't have an iPad, I didn't have a computer. Everything at that time was written on my phone, and it was mostly written in places like subway stations and you know a couple of bars, or the ramen restaurant. There's always places to write, I think, where, especially when you're walking around and then you'll get an idea. It's a great idea, just quickly sit down and write something out. So yeah, it's that's been my major tool, I think, for writing, is having it on my phone and trying to write instead of using social media, because I actually am only on Twitter, and I only joined Twitter to meet other writers. I'm not really interested in the whole social media scene as a whole.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's been numerous This Is Horror podcasts where we've spoken about social media and how it's a force for good and a force for bad, and we
Mm,
don't need to retread that ground now. I think it
mm,
is something that many people are
feel, yeah.
familiar with, but I
Mm,
mean, an example as to how it is a force for good is actually how we connected. It's how we
yeah, yeah.
met. I I can't remember exactly, but I wonder,
It was
and I
Will
if
Carver, I
if it
think
was yeah, via Will Carver,
Mm,
and I perhaps we'd put out a This Is Horror podcast with him, and then you chimed into the conversation. It's like, wait, you're in Japan, and then I look up, where you are, and we get talking, and it's like, hang on, we're basically next to each other. It's like
yeah,
that's how
yeah,
close in Japan, and like we a lot of people, when you meet someone who's in Japan, or you hear of someone who's in Japan, they're in Tokyo, or they're very
mm,
close to Tokyo.
yeah, yeah,
So for you to be, you know, kind of right here and not in Tokyo, that was a good moment.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of I was kind of shocked as well that you were where you are because
Yeah,
your county or your prefecture is right next door to mine, and
yeah,
again, like you said, there's not a lot of people around our parts, I think, or there's a
yeah,
lot more in mine, but definitely less in yours. But it's a shame that it's I think you should move out of your come over to mine, even though mine is a little bit more expensive, probably more conservative, maybe. Mm. But I went to Hokkaido the other day. That was really awesome, really excellent. And have you ever been to Hokkaido?
I
I,
haven't. It
I
is
recommend it.
very near the top, if not the top of the places that I want to go that I've yet to go.
Everyone there is really friendly as well. Really, really friendly. I think maybe it's because it's so damn cold there. It's a bit like the Alaska of Japan. Um, so it was really cool. Went down to the market and was eating fresh crab, straight from the shell, fresh sushi, and that is really nice. So I'm thinking, me and my wife are actually thinking the dream is Okinawa, to live in Okinawa, which is
Yeah,
the,
yeah,
the tropical paradise, or to live in the Alaska of Japan, Hokkaido. So at the moment, I'm staying where I am because my daughters are still quite young. So maybe
yeah,
once they reach high school, I reckon I'm gonna perhaps relocate.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the good thing with, both of us, we are writers and we are teachers, and those are jobs you can have them anywhere. So
Mm,
I mean, we do have the freedom to essentially live wherever we want. Now, yes, both of us. I mean, but I think the amazing thing when we first connected, and to this day, is just how many parallels there are between our lives, because both of us, yeah, you have daughters, I have a daughter from previous relationships. So like navigating kind of how that works as well. And yeah, so you do have to factor in, okay, where are your children? But as you say, there will come a point where they're old enough where that doesn't factor in so heavily,
yeah, I
and
think
they might relocate somewhere.
mm, I think it's the my daughters are actually the only reason perhaps I'm still in Japan. I think, um, and I'm in the city that I'm in strictly because of my daughters. Otherwise, I'd be maybe I'd I've always had itchy feet my whole life, so
Right.
I've traveled quite extensively. I've always wanted to live in Argentina. That's been the dream as well. Argentina or Mexico, somewhere like that. I think Taiwan is a fantastic country. I love visiting there, or I'd like to live there for a bit. So I always get itchy feet. So my daughters are the two people I think really keeping me grounded at the moment. The only two people in my whole life who've been able to keep me grounded in the same place for longer than 5 years or 10 years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think you said before, though, that you feel that Japan is home far more than anywhere else, more than the UK. So, I mean, I wonder if you're in a position to relocate, would you like to live somewhere else? And if you were, would you see that more as a kind of temporary relocation or like a kind of like, right, we'll try a year in Argentina, but Japan is home, Japan is the base?
Yeah, I do think it's probably home now. I think that I probably couldn't adapt to, I don't think, for example, one of my friends went back to England and all he did was complain about it and want to come back to Japan. So I don't think I could, I don't think I could integrate into maybe Western culture again. I think I've been, 17 years is a long time. 17 years is a very long time, and looking down the barrel of 20 years, it's a long time, and I worked really hard to get situated. So I think probably I will relocate at some point, but I do think it will probably be to Hokkaido or Okinawa, somewhere like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So not relocating out of Japan, but relocating within Japan.
If I, let's say for example, if I became very rich where I didn't have to worry about money, the dream would be to buy a house in London, a house in Okinawa, and a house in Hokkaido. So that way I could just travel in between. And then maybe this month I'm going to live in London, this month I'm going to live in Japan. But another important thing to mention is I actually have my Japanese green card. I'm not a full Japanese citizen because I don't want to give up my English passport. And I'd rather not lose my surname. If I become a Japanese national, I'd have to change my surname into a Japanese name. I'd have to give up my passport. I'd have to give up my English nationality. I couldn't have a dual nationality. Japan don't allow that. So what I have is the next best thing, which is the Japanese green card. It's I'm a permanent Japanese citizen, which means I can vote. I can vote in elections. I can get a credit card, which I haven't done, but so it can allow me to function in society a lot more. I can get a loan from the bank and whatnot. Whereas when you're just on a usual spousal visa or a working visa, you don't have those types of opportunities or rights. Mm. So
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to
yeah,
give that up. Took me long enough to get
yeah.
it.
Right. I think it's very frustrating for a lot of people that they don't have dual nationality, dual citizenship, but
Mm, mm,
it is what it is. I think the permanent residence probably is the sweet spot because I mean you've got the vast majority of advantages that you would have anyway, but you're not giving up that British citizenship. So I think it's as close as to dual
mm,
nationality, dual citizenship as you're going to get without actually having it.
mm, mm.
Well, we have come up to the time that we have together today. And for people listening or watching, this is the first show with Stephen. So we are going to be putting out another podcast in which Bob will join me, and we're going to go deep into his books. As with a lot of these things, this is the first part, the getting to know Steve, the origin story, if you will. But I know that recently you have re released your books. So I just want you to let people know a little bit about that and where they can get them.
Right. So we just re-released my trilogy of books. It's a series, and it's three books: "Say Goodbye When I'm Gone," "Always Dead," and "I'll Pray When I'm Dying." They're three separate stories, but they're interlinking by characters. They're set in the 1920s London all the way to the 1960s Hawaii um, era. And they're just really brutal crime stories But they've got a lot of heart as well, and we've re-released them at Punk Noir magazine. They're originally with Red Dog Press, but Red Dog Press went under, it collapsed, and you can currently get them on Amazon. And we're just now putting together the the print the print option now. But we've just started the press, and it's luckily we've got a genius working behind the scenes who does that kind of stuff for a job. So they're excellent at doing that. But for me myself, it's been a whole learning experience. But yeah, available on Amazon for the time being.
All right. Well, where can our listeners connect with you?
Like I previously said, I'm only on Twitter. I'm not anywhere else. So if you want to find me, I'm Steve Gon 58 on Twitter.
All right. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much, and thank you for listening, everyone.